Give you 8 seconds for a power code on my.
It's fine, we got it. Got priming. There you go.
I'm coming out.
Give you a good time.
I'm gonna pick up white key here.
You got it? Alright, 73
He's coming through.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This video is a little bit different today. We're looking at the last of the 5 melees that you receive from completing the new war, the Rumblejack. There's the Venado, which I will cover in the near future, but that doesn't come from New War itself. There are no spoilers for the quest or lore, so you can watch this video if you want. Though if you want this weapon, or any of the previous melee I've showcased in the past week, you will have to complete the quest. They don't even show up in the market until you do so. Otherwise, they can be farmed from the new bounties on Cetus and Fortuna afterwards. If you made it this far, you probably know that this video is unusual. I usually showcase against early Steel Path and Theorycraft to prove why it would work against level cap if applicable. For once, and for the first time ever, here is a piece of Theorycraft made reality, courtesy of NEPHERI, who invited me to come on a level cap disruption run for some fun, and obviously some footage. Go check them out. I recently joined their stream team, Power Creep, on Twitch as well, so you can catch all of us there for the live shows. This build I'm showing you today is also inspired by Nightmare for the helmet and Zephyr suggestions, with me tweaking the builds to my preference and choosing to bring the Rumblejack for my first ever level cap showcase. Hopefully you enjoy it. What is the Rumblejack? Well, I'd like to call it the Toxin Karis Prime. It has slightly worse base damage, and I can't exactly slash whereas the Karis can. However, the dagger stances do have force slash on them already, so this is mostly irrelevant. Rather, while Karis offers pure toxin to shred corpus, it has interesting applications for, say, gas AoE. Rumblejack is best built pure electric to take maximum advantage of the electric chaining potential and its innate typing. It is a bit unfortunate that Rumblejack only has 1.8 meters range, but it being majority electric weighted, unlike Karis Toxin, makes it extremely good at spreading AoE electric. Overall, it does look worse than Karis, but Rumblejack is far from being a bad dagger. I would say it is in the better halves, easily. I have a couple builds for you today. A quick attack spam build, the build I use in the level cap run, and a slight tweak that would have made it perform better and allow it to function as a hybrid light-heavy monster. Step 1. Making a light attack build. This is actually very similar to the build I brought into the level cap run. Keep in mind, this is the basic template. There is more to this, so keep watching. Pointed wind, because this dagger stance has the most sweeping for hitting multiple enemies. Daggers have 0.9 follow-through stat, so making the most of it. There's also force slash on this stance, so I would strongly recommend it in the end for that reason. It is your stock condition overload setup with scaling crits and status based on combo up to 12x. This weapon reaches only 75.6% crit chance at 12x combo and requires 2 gladiator mods to hit 100%. There are 2 ways around this. I would recommend dropping Primed Fury for Gladiator Vice and either dropping Organ Shatter or Shocking Touch for Gladiator Might. Having just one Gladiator mod will set you to 91% crit chance only. You could also technically squeeze one Gladiator mod on your frame instead, as so long as you have 2 on the loadout in total, that's all you need. Shocking Touch is originally here to boost up your electric even further, since chaining can do massive damage as it does scale with mods unlike gas. Primed Reach makes this dagger much more comfortable to use, nearly tripling its range from 1.8 to 4.8 meters. Prime to Fury because this dagger also shares the super low base attack speed like KORUMM, but like I said, you can drop it for Gladiator Vice, as daggers in general are a faster archetype to start with. Definitely bring Arcane Strike on your frame though for even more attack speed. This particular dagger in general, I would only recommend using with a primer. It really wants range for normal use as well as gladiator mods to hit 100% crit chance. So you really don't have 2 free slots to fit on rank 0 viral mods. This poke stick is truly electrifying. It definitely works better with grouping setups, but you don't even really need tight grouping. Literally any grouping ability works, even Magus Anomaly. But another useful thing about a pure electric dagger is that while you can build pure electric to maximize chaining DPS, the proc itself is also a hard CC on enemies. KORUMM Prime can't kill things, but anything that lives the first few hits can hit you back without constant use of primers. Basically, Rumblejack really shines on Steel Path and higher towards Endurance. Its many benefits are not obvious before that. The extra range ensures anything you're trying to kill, especially in Endurance, will be stunned in place as you hack them apart. You also have the option to use a heavy attack, which will also force proc slash on daggers. Alongside the electric procs, I generally would not use that on this build since it is intended for light attack spam, but you can save it for an acolyte if it pops up. A single heavy attack will deal with them swiftly. So what is the build I used for level 9k? Well, it wasn't perfect, and I did end up making tweaks to it afterwards, but let's see what it was. This is the build. Literally the only thing that changed was dropping range for Gladiator Mites. Why? Because level cap enemies are tanky, even if you strip all the armor off. It generally takes a decent amount of swings to kill the enemy, and I'm more focused on getting rid of immediate threats than trying to maximize KPS. Especially because the game mode I was playing was Disruption. This means I would have to also kill Demlists, and range is a useless wasted slot against them. Now, while I was able to kill trash mobs fine on this build, both due to stand slash procs and the Argonak setup I had running, I was tickling Demlists. I really needed to 12x heavy to deal with them, as well as the massive force slash proc. The difference was spamming light for a few seconds to proc 100 to 200k electric dots once they are full stripped, or use a 12x heavy and hit for near 1 million outright on the full strip and bleed them out for anywhere between 1 to 2 million per tick on average. I don't really have any heavy efficiency on this build. Therefore, while some Demlists I could kill with a single heavy attack and letting the dots tick, others would take 2 or 3, and the heavy gunner Demlists in particular would take 4 or 5, which was basically impossible for me to accomplish on this build at the time due to no heavy efficiency. So after that run, these are the tweaks I made instead. We would be dropping Gladiator Might for Reflex Coal and Focus Energy. This guarantees I still get electric damage to deal with trash mobs, while now acquiring a 90% heavy attack efficiency setup. Normally you don't want to slot Focus Energy because it screws up elemental combinations, but Rumblejack is supposed to be built for electric anyway, so it's free on this dagger. I did lose critical damage and some crit scaling, which reduces the potency of my bleeds against Demlists, because they can technically fail to crits. However, you could get around that by sticking on Xeneric for more heavy efficiency and dropping Focus Energy for Sacrificial Steel instead. However, I just really didn't want to form the weapon again, and we can spam multiple heavies back to back now on this particular build. At max combo, this would result in a 12x, then a 10x, and a 9x heavy for a fast triple threat attack, and daggers hit twice for full damage each time. So you're basically actually doing nearly 6 times damage when you triple swing like that. I should be able to deal with any Demlist in this mission that way, except the heavy gunner, which might take a little bit more time waiting on the dots to tick, but it would definitely die. Keep in mind, I don't have a helmet damage buff ability on this setup at all, as I chose Ensnare. I will get into the frame build later, but say if I did pick Roar or Eclipse, they definitely would have died from a single triple threat rotation due to the massively inflated damage. Also keep in mind, this is a Rivenless melee setup. Because we are playing Disruption, there can be downtimes on spawns or when you need to disengage when teammates are down across the map. Basically, I want to play things safe for my DPS potential. So I took Narmer, unlike where I said you could take Xeneric earlier for the heavy efficiency without having to run Focus Energy, but we took Narmer for Power Spike, which ensures my combo will only decay 5 at a time. Combining this with 90 efficiency built onto the weapon itself means no matter what happens, my Rumblejack should be sitting near 12x combo at all times and will be ready for any Demlist, or if a particularly tanky key carrier comes my way I want to dispatch solo quickly. Speaking of focus schools, I also took Magus Lockdown and Magus Elevates as my operator arcanes of choice. This is my last ditch source of CC for if I'm reviving someone, as you can still void dash to proc Lockdown even during the revive, which can save the day. Your frame is not invulnerable in void mode if you have an ability active, such as Turbulence. Even though it's above 90% damage reduction, level cap enemies will easily do enough damage to your frame to pull you back into it and stop your revive. Therefore, Lockdown is extremely useful. Elevate helps me deal with some toxin damage sources that don't scale, such as Nox Helmet Toxin procs or the Ghoul Purge Death Auras, which will slowly chip into my HP over time. This is a quick heal to patch that back up without having to dedicate any part of my frame or melee builds towards healing. Now my primer of choice today, it is a basic Epitaph build set to Viral and Radiation. It also has innate blast and force cold procs as well as IPS on the main shot that I would tag Demless with for 7 status effects. You could also use Nuke if you want, but the reason why I took Epitaph was I also wanted to showcase Rumblejack's AoE killing potential with the tornadoes against trash mobs. Secondary dexterity was pretty important on this setup to add an extra 7.5 seconds to Rumblejack's combo duration. 2 Augur mods for Augur set bonus, restoring shields on energy cast, which is crucial to shield gate strats. Though, to be honest, you can sort of still get by even without an AoE primer against trash mobs since we are running full strip. How are we doing that? Well, I'm sure you know already about Amalgam Argonak Metal Augur's combo. Basically, this mod makes all dagger damage instances capable of stripping armor. It's Shattering Impact, but for everything dagger, and includes even dots. Most importantly, the reason I took Zephyr is because the damage is transferred by the tornadoes and an AoE that are still considered dagger damage and will near instantly full strip enemies due to repeated damage instances as well as AoE. The chain dots between enemies will trigger tornado AoEs just like gas cloud dots. This will quickly strip everything even at level cap and allows me to just overwhelm their raw HP with AoE electric procs from Zephyr's tornado. Alongside the strong dagger build for both crits and status, the Argonak is literally just a dagger stat stick, so we only bothered to mod sprint speed and holster speed on the weapon if you take it out by accident. Dexterity arcanes again for more combo duration on our dagger. Now for Zephyr, it was a pretty balanced build in my eyes, maximum quality of life. While the strength multiplies the amount of damage reflected from what we put into it as well, I didn't feel we really needed more damage, and the main purpose of the tornadoes was actually to armor strip everything quickly. Therefore, for that reason, we left strength at 100. Natural talent is on the build because every serious encounter at level cap with Zephyr will want your tornadoes to armor strip as well as spreading damage, which has a long cast time. This also makes Ensnare faster to cast as well. We also need some duration for several reasons. It doesn't really matter as much for our 4 since it lasts so long and we only cast it when we kill things. But duration means we don't need to recast our 3 as often, which is a two-handed cast that interrupts actions. Turbulence deflects all bullets and is mandatory for our survival. Higher duration increases air tolerance to me remembering to always have it up. It also makes our 1 last longer, meaning we can cast Ensnare not immediately have to deal with enemies. Range is super important because it both allows us to group more trash mobs together to kill with Ensnare out to 7.5 meter pull radius, while also improving our CC range and survivability. It also allows us to cast Ensnare from further away against Demlists, letting us CC them sooner when we spot them out to 52.5 meters. It also gives a higher suck range on Airburst to 14 meters so we can drag enemies when we want, particularly into the tornado because that ragdoll will actually cause them to get raised up. Equilibrium because the build is a bit cast heavy at 100 efficiency. Our 4 being a mandatory part of our DPS rotation and 3 being mandatory for survival means I need to guarantee I can always cast them. We'll be pairing this with a Panzer for Viral Quills Synth Set Synergy for infinite health orbs to convert into energy today, which will easily trigger by having Viral Quills proc assists on everything, and Synth Fiber lets us pick them up even when our health is full. Back to the frame. Energize with Primed Flow helps us supercharge our energy with a larger bank as well, and Strike, as I said, to boost up that attack speed even further. We're also pairing this with Rolling Guard and Brief Respite for even more survivability with shield gating instant regen. This build with 2 Augur set bonuses is enough to fully restore your shields with any ability cast. Prime Sure-Footed to prevent knocks, and finally, Funnel Clouds, as I mentioned, to cover a much more thorough and larger area, and also to multiply your DPS by up to 12 times as each tornado can regurgitate your full damage, and it turns my Rumblejack attacks into AoE. If you want a full explanation on how Funnel Cloud works for multiplying your damage and why in certain cases it's better than using the base tornado, check out my KORUMM video from 2 days ago where I go into much more detail. Ensnare functions to concentrate enemies into this tornado for a sustained period and lock them in place, which is something Airburst cannot do. For setups that don't need more DPS buffs, this is superior to Airburst. Especially if you're using AoE weapons, Ensnare plus tornadoes will work far better. I had a blast using this loadout in the Disruption run. Thanks again to chat and everyone else who suggested me to come along, and thanks Nightmare for hosting the level cap. Honestly, for my first run and sloppy play, I was pretty happy how it turned out. Only minor changes to make for the build afterwards, and really, most of my downs were from just being greedy rather than a build deficiency. Who knows, maybe you'll see me do more of these in the future. Dealing with trash mobs was honestly quite easy. You just had to ensnare them and hack away with your Rumblejack to strip their armor off. Even if snare somehow wore off or was nullified, regular enemies would be stun locked by the perpetual electric dots that you would inflict, as well as through your tornadoes, while the stand slash would slowly whittle them down. If the enemy had less base armor, they would probably full strip after a few seconds of slashing and would immediately die to the electric dots, which were doing well over 100k per tick on stripped enemies. To get a much faster strip, you would also cast your funnel clouds, as I mentioned, over the ensnared targets, and swinging inside the tornadoes would perpetuate your quick swings in an AoE, with every instance of damage also able to strip armor and helps us make up for the fact we didn't slot primed reach. The AoEs would also trigger other tornadoes, which would then throw out their own electric AoEs to strip even faster. Any electric dot created would strip armor every single time it ticked, as well as chain to another enemy. So if you look at the time difference between Ensnare alone and Ensnare plus tornadoes, it is massive and basically comparing stripping over a few seconds to stripping near instantly. Against Demoliths, unfortunately, there aren't as many enemies trapped to readily spread electric dots into the tornadoes and bounce them back, especially once you start learning these spawns. However, you can still get extra hits by slashing into a tornado instead of the demo. Aiming for the tornado also lets you keep your distance and prevents you from being nullified. Once the armor is off, you can easily go in for the 12x heavy swings. Slash does bypass armor completely on the bleed ticks, but I still full strip because a single 12x swing can do way more damage than the initial slash tick against the demo. In a situation where you have the enemy locked down, you always want to set yourself up for maximum DPS in the DPS window later. I'd much rather 3 heavy swings against unarmored plus bleed ticks against a demo, rather than 3 swings plus bleed ticks against armored demo. If it pulses mine snare off early and starts running away. This is just my take, but it's up to you. Also, the light attack spam builds up a ton of electric dots against the Demoliths and is more than just chip damage if you manage to strip all the armor off. In the end, this was a loadout focused entirely around massive amounts of CC and AoE armor strip. So you can carve away at enemies at your own pace, a sustained DPS setup rather than more bursty like the Narmer setup Nightmare was running. Works on all enemies in Disruption up to cap, but like all level cap builds, requires attention and awareness to shield gate effectively. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or, better yet, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always, as soon as possible, like I've done with covering all this new war stuff. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm going to continue dropping tons more new war content in the future. You won't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.
I'm gonna do red pot on it.
Alright, hold on. How much steel lessons? 152 steel lessons? Oh! Headshot kills?